Raney, let me ask you if you will unmute your microphone. When you first met Waad and what your thoughts were about seeing this as a long form documentary?
You know, first of all, it's just such a pleasure to be here. I have to say, just before we launch in, that listening to Waad and having Robert, you ask her questions, I could do this all day long just to listen. I love the conversation. And especially when you get into, you know, how did she create a film? How did she even know how to compose those shots? So I'll just say, as a filmmaker, you know, Waad is one of the most naturally inclined filmmakers that I've ever met, and any of us have ever met. She's self-taught, but her composition and her ability to capture scenes is extraordinary. So she has a real gift, and we could see that right away in the footage when we were watching it. But I'll tell you a story of when I first met Waad. It was actually at the Emmys. And the reason for that is because she had won an Emmy for her work with Channel 4 News, and she was not able to show her face. And because we're longtime partners with Channel 4 and Channel 4 News and ITN, right? Those are the real backers of this film in the first place. We were just all hanging out, and there was Waad. And I learned that night, and I'll tell you, I'll never look back at that moment like with any regret, you know, oh my God, this amazing, wonderful, thoughtful woman has 500 hours of footage she was able to get out of Syria. And I had seen a lot of it just in news form. And I literally said to Ben, who was one of the executive producers, like, if you guys do anything that's long form, we're in. And so it was a very instinctual moment where I met her and I resonated with her and with Ben, the person who was with her that night, one of the big, you know, thought leaders in the UK about film and news. And we just decided in that moment that there was something great here. We had no idea that it would be a feature-length, profound film. We just knew that she was telling a story that Frontline certainly hadn't told. We had done 17 films in Syria. It's my obsession, my personal obsession is Syria. So we had been going back and telling stories from multiple perspectives, but we had never told the story that came from a woman living through war with her family and her husband, who was a doctor on the front lines. We hadn't told that story, and I thought it might resonate. And, you know, I was right about that, but we would have never known, you know, until we got into the rushes of her films, what the depth of the ability for her to tell her own story was. I mean, it was a really profound experience and a big honor.
What if I might ask, what was the Emmy that you won? What was the film that you won for?
The foreign coverage for news.
Yeah.
What was it actually? What was it? Was it a single piece or?
Yeah, no, it was like the whole reports from Aleppo. It's called All Inside Aleppo. And we used a couple of like this stories inside for Sama, but with longer, like, of course, but there was like the series called Inside Aleppo.
I mean, the other thing, Robert, to know is that she mentioned the amount of attention those news stories were getting. They were in the multiple millions by then. So we weren't able to see Waad's face. We could just hear her voice and her telling. And so a lot of us, you know, especially in America, were listening like, who is this woman? So it was quite a moment when she won, but she wasn't able to go on stage. So a lot of us were intrigued and curious about her story. And it was, you know, leaders like Naveen and Ben from Channel 4 News who had identified her early, you know, and gave her that kind of platform to tell her story. It was amazing.
Were any of those things that you did before the film about Sama?
No, none of this was like personal story. There was like part of personal story when we entered into Aleppo walking. But even at that time, like there was no time even to talk with Naveen and Ben about what I was doing like else out of like this couple of news piece, which we done together. Because I mean, even for me personally, like that footage was more like about personal like memory, not anything more than that. But then when we start working on For Sama, and I mean, as Raney just mentioned, like none of us knew how this film will be or how long it will be or how deep it will be. We were just but
what about the focus on Sama and telling the story of your becoming a mother and living through this the siege with an infant and then a toddler? I mean, and using that as the frame and the device for the story. How did that evolve? I mean, when did you decide that that's what?
Yeah, so at the beginning, we were just knew that there is something, of course, in all of this footage we need to work on, and it would be like a longer story, but none of us knew like what is it about even. For me personally, I was like very emotional about everything happened. I was kind of like shocked about the whole experience. And like from the whole team, I met with Edward Watts, who was like my co-director in this, and we were kind of like just watching to see like how we can start, because I mean, I followed people for years. We have so much stories where we can like start from. So it was very confusing. But then when we watched the personal footage that I have, and at that point, like everyone else was involved, from Niveen, Ben to Raney to Siobhan, all the executive producers, and like all of them kind of like, it was very clear for them that this should be personal. I'm the only one who was like, no, I will never do it personal. And it didn't took me like very long time, but it wasn't also very easy for me to say like, yes, because I mean, I understand that they have a point from that, but also for me, I didn't want to brief the whole story of Aleppo through my personal story. It was for me like more like, oh no, I should talk about other people. But then when we start working together, it was very clear like, no, it's important to make it personal. It's important to make it about like that relationship as a mom and as a filmmaker into that situation.
You know, I would say, Robert, one of the most extraordinary things we saw from like the edit room perspective, and you know this from long form writing yourself, is that the film really evolved, and we gave it, you know, collectively, we all decided this was the one to give time to. And sometimes that extra time in the edit gives the filmmakers, so Waad and Ed Watts, who was there as well, it gave them time to actually find what was truly unique and extraordinary in their footage, right? And we had so many iterations of the film previous to this that were also brilliant. Yeah. But when they struck upon that idea, it was like everything just lined up behind it. And so sometimes, you know, you need to give these projects that are worth it that amount of time. And it's not easy because, you know, everybody wanted this out. You know, we were all like news people too, and we're journalists, but it was really worth that labor that they took to really find their story and to find Waad's story.